Welcome to the Richmond Events Podcast, where we take you inside the UK's most exclusive business forums. You'll get to meet the delegates, suppliers and speakers shaping their industries. Richmond Events, this is where business gets done.
Hello and welcome to the Market Insight Forum here at Richmond Events. I'm here with Rohit Talwar. Rohit, you're talking today and running a workshop on the next frontier. Tell us about that.
So I'm a futurist and my role is helping organisations think about the factors shaping the emerging future and then what can we do as organisations to be ready for almost anything given the range of scenarios that could play out. So today we're going to have a fast-paced, intense session looking firstly at some of those macro factors that people might not be thinking about but that could have a massive impact in the next year or two, and secondly then diving into using foresight to look at how organisations are gearing up to be ready for anything.
So what are those, can you give us an example of a couple of those micro things that could happen?
So the macro factors that I think are becoming more and more important, obviously there's things like AI, rapid advances in science and technology, there's the environment, climate change, sustainability, but the two I'm really going to focus on is that intersection between technology and the big technology companies and the strategies of the US and China, which is all that counts right now. And in particular, I'm going to get people to look at current events and think about what does that mean when we look behind the surface. Just a simple example, we've just heard that SpaceX is going to do an IPO. It's going to be valued at somewhere between $1.8 and $1.9 trillion. Instantly, that will make it the sixth biggest company in the world. But that valuation is about 100 times their revenue. Right? That is breaking all economic models, all valuation models. But what it's a signal of is that there's almost a pull away of the big tech companies where people aren't valuing them based on revenue today. They're valuing them based on future profits. But the other thing that is of importance to companies is that quite a lot of the companies who are going to be in the room today are quite big. So they will be in index tracker funds, exchange traded funds, which means because they're big, the funds have to have a certain proportion of those companies' shares. But when SpaceX comes in and Anthropic at $1 trillion and OpenAI at $1 trillion, the funds will have to weight themselves accordingly in order to have those companies in. So they're going to be dropping some companies and massively reducing their holding of some companies, which means they'll be dumping shares in the marketplace, which in turn will have an impact on the valuation of those companies, which they probably wouldn't have thought about. If you're a big hotel chain, you're, Charlie Big Potatoes, you're in the top 100. You might not be. The launch of SpaceX might actually knock you out. That affects your ability to raise credit. If you want to buy people off your balance sheet, your valuation's lower. So all sorts of things start to happen. And that's what I want people to start thinking about, is not just what we hear in the news, which is the noise, it's the signal behind the noise. I'll give you one more example if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that everyone's becoming obsessed about is digital sovereignty, which is, do you own the technology that you use in your business? The reality is that most of it is owned by very big US tech companies like Amazon and Google. And most of the time we haven't bothered about that. But suddenly the war in Iran has given people a massive wake-up call. Because what we discovered was that the data centers that were running in every Gulf country owned by Amazon were also running US military information on them. And so Iran took every single one of them out. Amazon turned around and said, because this is an act of war, force majeure applies, we're out of here, your problem. So all those clients had to recover really quickly. And so you suddenly start to have to ask questions about, well, where is my data? How much control do I have? And more importantly, what's going on in my own country? So none of us really know that Amazon have 4 big sites where all of the most critical military information is held. One of them is here in London. What would we do if that site was targeted? How much disruption would it cause? So really trying to get people thinking about those things and saying the foresight is about understanding what's going on, looking at the noise, sifting out the signals, and thinking about what that could mean for us strategically. And I think that's a big shift, where in the past we did foresight studies, we wrote nice reports, we did great presentations, we outcompeted each other on models and PowerPoint slides, but the net result was relatively low impact on strategic decision making, because you had to water down the most radical stuff in order to get it through to the executive team and the board. And by the time you got it to them, there's like, okay, how much did I spend on you telling me what I already know?
Yeah.
Now, people are desperate to know the stuff that's going to keep them awake at night. They have to know what's driving uncertainty. And a big part of it, which we won't get into too much today, is then, well, how are they preparing for that? And how do you get organizations where the leadership team are more comfortable with uncertainty, because that is now the new normal, and aren't doing the kind of crazy thing that we would do in the past, which is see a problem, start a project.
Yeah.
Because we have a massive failure rate on tech projects and an even higher failure rate on AI. So one of the things that getting good at preparing for the future is to see our organization as a portfolio of experiments. Putting an AI system in to improve sales, it's not a guaranteed success. It's a hypothesis that that will work. Expanding into India or Malaysia is a hypothesis that it will work. And it's starting to look at it that way and putting much more rigorous tests in of whether it's working or not. So it's getting that mindset in place to think about, you know, you're not sharp suited, well-dressed, Armani outfitted execs anymore. You're people in white coats doing lab experiments. Yeah. And so it's getting that thinking through. And for us, it's these things that really count now. Is how you gear up for that world, and how you don't buy into the vendor hype about AI's coming, it's going to eat us all. Well, it will if you dive in without preparation. And that's why MIT found that 95% of big companies are failing with their AI projects, because they're not laying the foundations, particularly training. There seems to be almost a genetic aversion to training people to use AI, but you wouldn't go out and buy a Ferrari and say, we don't need to teach you how to drive at speed. You know how to use you've driven your Ford Mondeo for years. You know, AI is a super powered tool, and it's going to get ever more powerful. It's going to disrupt society. If you look at what's coming next, it's bigger than a brainful. And that's why we need now not to be rushing into projects, but really putting a focus on taking people rapidly through building their capability from being aware to having true mastery in how to use it. And when you do that, you save a lot of time, you get an awful lot of benefits. And when you try and do AI projects, people have got half a clue about what you're talking about.
So considering, I mean, thank you very much. That was incredibly detailed and I love it all. Like, considering how when SpaceX comes in and this could alter where people are standing in the hierarchy of business, by having these sort of contingencies and thought mindsets in place, will that add to back to the value of their business? Because ultimately, should one of those things happen, they're already there with that plan in place to bring them back up again.
And some of these developments are so big that you don't have an instant solution, but what you need is time to reflect. So if you look at the big 7 tech companies in the US, or the big 10, they're about 45% of the entire US stock market. They're about 20% of the entire global stock market. If you add in the companies that rely on them for services and support, closer to 55, 60%. When we add in SpaceX, Anthropic and OpenAI, it moves higher and higher. So that's distorting things. We've never had that before, where one sector has been so dominant. And we're just beginning to see what that looks like. So over 95% of all the growth in the US has just come from AI investments. 70% of all the profit in the US stock market comes from those big tech companies. And in fact, it's more and more consolidated. We don't have an instant answer. We need to understand that. We need to think about that. We need to think about what that means for us when we're almost moving from seeing ourselves as being Premier League to realizing that there's this top level franchise like a Super League
just come in
with 20 companies in it. And the rest of us are then, what does that mean? How does that change things? And you can't resolve that overnight, and you can't bring McKinsey in to tell you, because they have no more clue than anyone else about what the perfect answer is. What we need is the thing that we don't give ourselves, which is time to breathe, time to think. We need to send our executive teams off on 10-day Vipassana retreats where they're not allowed to say a word, where all they can do is sit with themselves and their thoughts. Because what we know is organisations can't respond well if we as individuals aren't responding well. If we're in blind panic and constantly looking at the value of our pension and our ISA portfolio, we're probably not making the best decisions in our personal life, and we're certainly not making the best decisions in our business life. So part of it is those teams really seeing the value of stopping and slowing down as the best way of responding, and then making considered choices, doing less projects but doing them well, and really making tough choices about what to stop, about where our risk exposure is, thinking about our supply chains. One of the things that the Gulf crisis at the moment has done is a massive acceleration of people's focus on sustainability and consumption. Not because they wanted to, but because the price of a lot of raw materials and inputs has gone up. So everyone's going, well, how do we use less? And how do we source more locally? And all those things that actually benefit from a sustainable consumption point of view and an environmental footprint point of view. So it's a second order effect, but actually the planet is kind of benefiting from what's going on in the Straits of Hormuz. Mad? But again, we have to start to just make ourselves more aware of this and see the patterns and understand the complexity and equip ourselves to make the next stage of the journey.
Love this. So with all that being said and how people should be getting out, learning this and doing that, how does bringing everyone together at an event like the Market Insight Forum benefit that movement forward?
Well, I'm a Chelsea fan, and let me give you this analogy. There are times when I feel like I'm the only one who's really worried about how badly we're doing and how much money we've wasted. But then every now and then you see a post pop up on Facebook, or several posts, where you see that there's 100,000 Chelsea fans all having those same concerns. And it's reassuring. There are people you can talk to and chat it out. You're not going to solve the problem. But the same is true for people in organisations. We're concerned, we're not sure if we're doing the right thing. Are we moving fast enough? Are we going too slowly? Are we going too fast? What are we missing from our radar? And by having those conversations with other people in a similar boat, it can be reassuring that actually we're not that far apart. But it can also be inspiring when we see that they've done something that we hadn't thought about and it's worked. Or it can help us from an efficiency point of view to see what the issues were that led to things not working, and to say, well, either we kind of see the same things and we either address them or stop the projects, or we learn from those things when we're designing our projects. That's particularly true with things like AI. So, and you form networks, hopefully you make lasting conversations, lasting connections with people that live on long past this event. And the other thing is the value you get from talking to all these vendors, because these vendors have the benefit of talking to a huge number of corporations and organizations outside this event. But also, if you use it well, they're talking to a whole bunch of people here today. So they're like a snapshot. And if you ask them questions about what they're seeing across the piece, we can also learn a lot from that. Now, that's not something that's marketed, but it's something I would take value from, is to sit down and say, look, here's what my needs are, what can you do for us, but also tell me what you're seeing.
Right, thank you so much. I look forward to getting a sneak peek of your workshop later today.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
My pleasure, thank you.